So, I'm en route to Los Angeles, currently in New Mexico. Just drove past the border checkpoint. It definitely feels like I'm in a new or different world or a different land. This part of the drive is one of my favorite parts of the drive, going through New Mexico, particularly in the morning. It looks a little greener than I remember. It's been maybe 2 years since I've taken this drive last, and just things look very green. So I have a few thoughts this morning. First of all is that it's so refreshing to me, the horizon here. So there's open land, open territory as far as my eyes can see. You know, I grew up in Georgia. Of course I love the trees and the woods, but I also love the flatlands in Texas and New Mexico, Arizona, and California, where you can see land, you can see to the horizon. Your eyesight is not obstructed to the horizon. And sometimes I wonder if that influences how people think. Sometimes I wonder, as much as I love the forest, I wonder that if you grow up or if you live somewhere and you're enclosed by woods and forest, if sometimes you cannot literally see the forest for the trees. Whereas if you're someplace where you can see for miles, you can literally see for miles. So whether that affects your perspective on other things as well, you know. So it's refreshing to me to be out west where I can see for miles. I can see the horizon. So I'm coming up on some, looks like a little mountain range here. It's quite beautiful. Let's see if you can see it. See that? Quite beautiful. On cruise control. Very relaxing drive. Another thought of mine, driving through the border patrol, you know, they were real laid back. You know, they asked me, am I a U.S. citizen? Yes. Keep going. You know, they didn't want to see ID or anything like that. Real laid back. But it makes me wonder, it just makes me think about how civilization, man, we're always trying to control territory. We're always trying to control territory from each other. You know, this group of people can't go here, and that group of people can't go there, and this is the king's highway, this is the king's road, the king's forest. You know, to me, that's kind of what it is. You know, I'll put it out there. I don't really buy into a lot of this immigration talk. You know, this person can't come here without this sort of documentation. That person can't go there with that sort of documentation. You know, I understand where people are coming from, where they believe they're coming from a social services perspective. But where they believe they're coming from. It's interesting. Look at this. Where they believe they're coming from. I don't want to get into politics too tough, but it's just interesting to me how we have this proclivity to try to control the land. We have this proclivity to try to control interest and access. We have this proclivity to set up checkpoints and fences. And this proclivity patrols. You know, it's interesting. I don't think it's uniquely American. I think, you know, that's what we do. That's what mankind does. You know, what was it? It was in England, pre-Magna Carta. Carta, where you had these people that had spent centuries hunting, surviving by hunting, hunting deer and whatnot, and they could be severely punished for hunting or gathering firewood in the king's wood, in the king's woods. And so part of the legal reform with the Magna Carta was to allow people to hunt, and make a living and survive. And it makes me think of, let's say in North California, the beaches in North California, and they set up laws that tell people you can't fish or you can't gather mussels. And you think about the Indians that were there, the Ohlone that were there for thousands of years, surviving on the coast, surviving off the land. That's also what mankind does. That's what we do. We survive on the land. So before there were governments, before there were border patrols and checkpoints, and, there were people surviving on the land, living off the land. So I think it's interesting how society seeks, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm saying that it's interesting how society seeks to control and parcel and divide and disperse what the land gives freely. What nature, what the universe gives freely. So, I don't want to tell anybody, to break any laws or do anything illegal. But the way I feel is that you succumb to these disbursements if you want to. I feel like there's a perception of scarcity. I feel like the disbursements, the checkpoints, the control, it also goes along with spiritual. They tie together. It goes along with spiritual control. So there's a close relationship with church and government. Okay, we have in our Constitution, we talk. 1 minute we talk about separation of church and state. The next minute, we want to talk about, okay, in God we trust, but not God, the God in a very dogmatic sense. 1 minute we'll talk about separation of church and state. The next minute we'll talk about, our laws are based off of religious principles, religious undertones, But the truth is, the way I see it, I shouldn't say the truth. The way I see it is that church and government are basically the same. The church was the government in its inception. Let's talk about the Catholic Church. In its inception, the church was the government. The church, all the baptisms and the weddings or the marriages, there are all these checkpoints in people's lives from the cradle to the grave that the church would administer. And if you look at it, if you step back and look at it, it's an administration the same way, very similar to, even in the Bible, the Bible, they make allusions or reference to it. It's very similar to the way a shepherd herds sheep. Very similar to the way that a rancher manages livestock. So the church / government in its inception, I'm talking about, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, maybe even 10,000 years ago. If you look at the history of civilization, church and government are very closely intertwined. Now, I'm not saying either are bad. I'm not saying church or government are bad. I'm just describing what they do. And so there's a history of they control and manage people. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's what they do. They control and they manage people. And there's disbursements. So disbursements, and with the church, a lot of the religious schisms were regarding these disbursements. Who gets to disperse God's grace? Who gets to disperse God's favor? Who gets to disperse God's word? Once upon a time, most people were illiterate. They couldn't read the Bible. They couldn't, they couldn't read. The Bible were in scrolls, or books were not readily available, were not easily accessible. So very few people could read or write, much less speak Latin. The Bible was written in a language that the common person did not speak. So there's been levels of access to and disbursement to there's a perception of, you have these intermediaries between the divine, these intermediaries between God, these intermediaries between, and they disperse God's grace, they disperse salvation, they disperse. Once upon a time, you used to have to pay for that stuff. You used to have to pay for it in a way, you still do, but a lot of the religious reformations with Martin Luther and the Protestant reformations, were involving the monetary transactions of alms. So this monetary exchange for grace, this monetary exchange for salvation, and I'm speaking on this not to give a history lesson, not to give a botched history lesson, but I'm speaking on just to give examples of disbursement. So this disbursement, church/government, social structures of society, they want to disperse. They want to give the perception of scarcity. And they want to disperse, whether we're talking about money, whether we're talking about food, whether we're talking about God's grace, whether we're talking about knowledge. If you just step back and take a look, and you can see this tendency, this dispersing tendency, this rations. We're rationing wealth. We're rationing, so what I'm submitting is that so much more is unlimited, is infinite, that what's natural is not disbursement. What's natural is free access to all, to all that have wisdom, to all that have wisdom, to all that have knowledge. Our scarcity scarcity starts in the mind. Now, if there is scarcity in the form of a famine, scarcity in the form of drought, nature, I won't say that nature never presents scarcity, but I'll say that scarcity can be overcome with knowledge. If there's a drought, there's a famine, knowledge is energy. It may take knowledge to know where to dig for water, knowledge to know, where to go to search for water, where to follow animal herds and animal patterns to find water. Knowledge and energy. And even the knowledge, when you look at it, all life is the pursuit and the management of energy. So, and each biology, each organism has its own, through information, its own structure to harness and manage energy. So there's knowledge on a natural sense. That knowledge may be acquired. Your body, your DNA has knowledge that may be acquired over, time, millennia of evolution, to apply that knowledge, to make use and to manage the abundance of energy that the universe provides. So maybe nature may present scarcity at some times, but the universe, there's abundance. And the abundance is available through knowledge or information, structure-ordered information. So it gets interesting. There's different lenses. There's the lens of there's the rational reductionist physics linear physics lens, and then there's kind of like a nonlinear physics lens or a nonlinear scientific lens, and then there starts to get spiritual lenses that don't depend on science, experiment, observation, trial, testing. Personally, I value them all. Personally, I value the rational reductionists. I value the linear physics or the linear science. I value the nonlinear. I value the metaphysics and the non-rational, because rationality to me is still but a tool. It's flawed. Rationality, logic is not infallible. It's not, and the further you push the boundaries of it, the more you realize how fallible it is. I think that the great scientists, the Einsteins and the Feynmans and the Hawkings, I think they understand the limits of rationality and the limits of logic better than anybody. But all right, bird. Yeah, the carrion birds are in the road. I guess eating carrion, the cycle of life. So I kind of lost my thread a little bit, but basically we're talking about disbursement. We're talking about the perception of scarcity. We're talking about abundance. We're talking about abundance is available through knowledge. And what I wanted to make I wanted to tie knowledge and information together. And I wanted to tie, your body has knowledge. Your DNA has knowledge. What's the difference between knowledge and information? You might say, well, information is data. Knowledge is information in context. The meaning of that data. The conscious meaning, conscious application, consciousness applied to information. Perhaps that's knowledge. That could be one definition. But that's the difference between scarcity and abundance. And it might even be, there might be some way of relating abundance to information. That abundance is where, so if the difference between scarcity and abundance is knowledge, want of knowledge, and the more knowledge you have, the more access you have, the more access to resources, awareness of resources. Then if you have infinite knowledge, you have infinite abundance. So we're kind of tying together, we're tying together infinite knowledge and infinite abundance. And infinite knowledge is divine knowledge. And we've tied together knowledge and consciousness. Ooh, here's the man. All right, folks. Hopefully you don't see me get pulled over. But I got to manifest positive energy. Manifest positive energy. All right. I try to walk the walk. I try. I have negative touch points with law enforcement, and that's debatable. As to why, but I'm a law-abiding citizen. But sometimes people, I don't want to make this topic of this discussion about that right now. But sometimes people, are very judgmental on physical appearances, and sometimes people classify, we generalize. And just like I have negative touch points with law enforcement, it's a feedback loop, because There are sometimes members in law enforcement that they have negative touch points with, or they feel they have negative touch points with people that look like me. So, anyway, we're talking about knowledge and abundance. And we were making a relationship between scarcity and lack of knowledge, and abundance with infinite knowledge. And where you have infinite knowledge, there is abundance, infinite abundance. And so there's a correlation, a relationship, maybe even an alter ego, maybe infinite. There's a way of looking at it where infinite abundance is infinite knowledge, and infinite knowledge is infinite abundance. They're one and the same. They're two words that describe the same thing, But I say that to say, I learned that it serves me best whenever and however possible to think in abundance. It serves me best whenever, however possible. I've noticed that the more I think in terms of abundance, the more I focus on abundance, the more I have. And when I say have, I don't mean like in things like material things. I mean that too, but I mean in everything. I mean in friendship, in love, in experience, in freedom, in everything, in all things, in health, in every and all things. So it is not my habit to focus on abundance. It's my habit to focus on scarcity. It's my habit to focus on what I don't have or what I have a little of. I only have $100. I only have, 3 weeks to get this done. I only have, 4 friends. I've been conditioned to think in terms of scarcity, but I've been slowly training myself to think in terms of abundance and to focus on and see abundance. And now, how did we get here when we were talking about the beauty of New Mexico? Wow, it's so green out. I mean, just look at this. How green it is. I wasn't expecting it to be this green. So how do we get here focusing on... we're talking about border patrol and border checkpoints and disbursement and scarcity versus abundance. But all right, folks, I'm going to sign out. I probably should have 2 hands on the wheel and not to get into a scarcity mind state, but I'll keep you guys posted on further updates on this trip.